Alright, yesterday in the Championship, we saw a huge shake-up at the bottom end of the table. We saw Portsmouth and QPR both picking up massive victories, match postponements causing chaos for other clubs, and there's quite a bit to dive into in today's video. There's now only 3 points separating Plymouth, who sit in the bottom 3, with Derby, who are in 16th at the moment. And predicting who's going to go down from the Championship at this point is pretty impossible. For the purposes of today's video, we will be focusing on the relegation battle, diving into some of the results from over the weekend and potentially looking at their implications going forward. So on the back of the weekend's action we've just had, this is how the Championship table is shaping up. Obviously, for the purposes of this video, we are paying particular attention to the sides at the bottom end of the table. Now obviously, match postponements were causing a bit of chaos over the weekend, so we didn't get the relegation showdown, I should say, between Plymouth and Oxford in the end. That will now take place later in the season. Also had Cardiff's game against Watford called off as well, so they weren't in action either, which I think puts a little bit more emphasis on those teams and their games in midweek, really. Plymouth have a massive game coming up against Swansea at home. Oxford go up against QPR in what looks like a massive relegation showdown, and Preston play Cardiff in midweek as well, so some massive games to look forward to. We'll be predicting them on the channel tomorrow, but I think the place to start out is with bottom of the Championship, Hull City. It was a 1-0 loss to Blackburn Rovers over the weekend, now means that's 6 consecutive defeats for Hull, and it's 11 games without a win for them in the Championship, the longest winless run of any side currently in the league. Obviously, Ruben Sellers has been confirmed as the new Hull City manager. They managed to poach him away from Reading. He was in attendance of this game, and I mean, on the back of that, I think he'll be preparing for what will be a real uphill battle this season, because despite Hull, and to be honest, from what I saw, it looked like a decent first half showing from them. They got into some good areas. Second half, they couldn't manage to maintain that. What concerns me, though, is other than probably Casey Palmer, who was the bright spark in this team, the lack of quality in that Hull City side really was alarming. I mean, they had 14 shots in this game, but only accumulated an XG of 0.96, and despite having the majority of the ball for this one, Blackburn managed to weather the storm in the end. And I mean, just looking at this run of form here, it is absolutely grim. Like I was saying before, Hull are on the longest winless run of any Championship club right now, 11 without a win, 6 consecutive losses on the bounce. Up until January, their fixture list is a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest with you. In midweek, they've got Watford, they've then got games against Coventry, Swansea, Preston, Blackburn, and Middlesbrough, obviously, which is when the January window opens. But something big needs to happen in January, I feel like, for Hull to get themselves out of this situation. On the flip side of that, though, there are some real positives around Portsmouth right now, because they really put Bristol City to the sword this weekend, beating them 3-0. In terms of Bristol City, I mean, God knows, they can turn up and look like Real Madrid one week, and they're looking like a Sunday League side the next. But full credit to Portsmouth here, because that's now back-to-back games at Fratton Park where they've put a decent or-so side to the sword. You know, not long ago we saw them beating Preston 3-1. They were absolutely dominant in that game, and in a similar sort of vein here, really fast start from John Mousinho's side, and that was a bit of an issue with Portsmouth. In their first maybe 8 or so matches, they were always guilty of starting a little bit slowly, guilty of conceding a few goals in the opening 10 minutes, but of late they've been starting games really fast, and if they can turn Fratton Park into a bit of a fortress this season, as they have done with their last couple of home results, who knows what's possible for them this season. They now go into a midweek game at home against Norwich, and on the back of Norwich's showing against QPR, you'd fancy maybe Portsmouth to get something from that game, and then they travel away to Derby in what looks like a massive clash. Really good showing from Portsmouth in this game, though. Colby Bishop probably the standout performer with a goal and assist, but like how that forward line is shaping up, to be honest with you, I think they've got a decent mix of profiles in there. Murphy in the goals recently, Lang's always very busy, and obviously Richie's got that experience as well. So yeah, starting to get players back from injury. It's all starting to come together for Portsmouth. And speaking of things coming together, boy did QPR need that result over the weekend, but full credit to Marty Cifuentes' side. I have to hold my hands up. I was back in Norwich for a result in this one, but going up against the league's most formidable forward line right now, to keep a clean sheet in this game and to absolutely put them to the sword, beating them 3-0, claiming their first home win of the season in the process as well. What wonders that could do to QPR's confidence going forward this season, especially when you consider the fact that QPR really have some winnable games coming up, you know. I mean, it's all well and good having a decent run of form on paper, you need to put that into practice on the pitch, but with more showings like that over the weekend, you'd probably back QPR to be fine this season, but it's tough to say because it's just so congested at the bottom end of the Championship. What I would say about QPR is, even in some of these games where they weren't quite having the rub of the green, their underlying stats have been decent this season, certainly not suggesting that they've been the weakest team in the Championship like maybe the league table has suggested recently. But my word, could that result there do absolute wonders for their confidence. But in terms of one side who's really short on confidence right now, that's got to be Luton. Got into a good lead against Swansea early on with Adebayo hitting the back of the net after 17 minutes, but I mean, as you can see by the momentum bar here, it was Swansea who were bossing it for the vast majority, and I mean, this is becoming a real concern for Luton at the moment, isn't it? I think we look at that squad and we think, oh, you know, Luton will be fine this season, they'll manage to pull themselves out of this rut, but weeks and games go by and Luton are still in this same exact position that they found themselves in a few months ago. They're sticking by Rob Edwards, but it's becoming increasingly tough to see him turning this ship around, especially when this was a Luton side, let's not forget, that were fancied by a lot of people for the top two this season. Only Plymouth have conceded more goals than Luton have so far this season. 34 goals conceded in 19 matches. They've been way too reliant on their home form this season as well, and when results like this crop up and you suddenly can't always fall back on your home games to win, the problems are really accumulating there at Luton at the moment. Oh, and after that we need to talk about Preston North End, because it was a 1-1 draw with Sheffield Wednesday over the weekend, but honestly I feel like I'm in Groundhog Day with North End at the moment, because the same things keep happening, and more often than not it's the same outcome every single week. It's now 9 games without a win for Preston in the league, which is becoming a real concern for us at the moment. But in saying that, we've not been losing a lot of football matches recently, and I might be going crazy, but I actually think a lot of our recent performances have actually been fairly decent as well, and it's just so frustrating that we can't kill games like this off. Now, I think every Sheffield Wednesday fan will admit that they were far away from their best this weekend. I think Wednesday aren't the same side without Barry Bannon in the team. I think they were really lacking his influence in midfield for this game. And listen, the game could have been completely different had Windass converted that penalty for them in the second half. But for the majority of this game, I mean, we'll look at the underlying stats here. I mean, it was all sort of one-way traffic for a lot of this one. Preston accumulating an XG of 3.34. We had 6 big chances in this game, and yet it ended level, 1-1 in the end. It was a poor goal to concede. Brad Potts not doing enough to stop the cross, and Freddie Woodman really poor as the ball trickled in past him. We've now drawn 8 of our last 11 games in the league. We've only lost 2 matches in that time, but the lack of wins and lack of cutting edge in the final third really is becoming a concern for North End at the moment, and what it does is it really emphasises the importance of that game in midweek away at Cardiff. Despite being frustrated with the result though, the overall performance level I thought was pretty good from North End. There were quite a few standout performers for me. I thought the midfield partnership of Thor Dawson and Ali McCann worked really well. I think we're a better side right now without Ben Whiteman in it. I think these two complement each other quite well. Mads did really well on his return to the side as well, and Reece obviously getting his goal, so positives to take, but my god, has this been a frustrating run of form for us recently. Derby fans, I think, are becoming increasingly frustrated at the moment, and I think rightly so. It's 5 games without a win for Paul Warren's side in the league. It's now 3 consecutive losses on the bounce as well. Listen, Derby's survival bid this season was never going to be dictated in an away match at Ellen Road. Leeds are going to beat the majority of teams that come there this season, but I mean, we can see here by the momentum bar, this was one-way traffic for the vast majority of this game. Could have been a lot worse, to be honest with you. I mean, we can see here Derby created next to nothing, an XG of 0.08, only had 37% of the ball. But the problem Derby have run into recently is obviously results at home have started to dry up. I do think there was an air of misfortune around their recent 2 home losses against Swansea and Sheffield Wednesday. On another day, they very easily could have got something from both of those matches. But when Derby were on a decent run at the start of the season, we were highlighting, is there an over-reliance on home form and scoring from set-piece situations, because as soon as those two things have dried up for them a little bit, they've obviously found themselves in this rut where they are getting dragged increasingly closer to this bottom three right now. Only 3 points between Plymouth and themselves in 16th at the moment. So with the recent run of form, it does feel like there's an added onus on these upcoming fixtures, and Derby haven't really got it easy. Obviously, midweek travel away to Burnley. I don't think many people will fancy them to get much from that game. These two matches here before Christmas are absolutely vital. At home against Portsmouth and then away to Luton. The pressure's being cranked up on Paul Warne right now, and I think these two matches right here are probably the games that decide whether or not he's the man to take Derby forward, because if Derby lose both these matches especially, I can see it becoming really toxic there. Stoke are a bit of a frustrating one at the moment, and definitely are a side who could find themselves dragged back into this relegation scrap. They had an initial upturn of results, but recently have found themselves in a bit of a rut. Listen, their last two matches on paper have been really tough, obviously against a good Burnley side and a good Sunderland side. They've lost back-to-back matches, but the overall picture for Stoke recently has been pretty frustrating. Not just talking about results, but actually performances. Even in some of the games that Stoke have won of late under Pelach, quite a few Stoke fans I've seen saying that has somewhat papered over the cracks. Obviously, when I got to see them over a full 90 minutes against my side, Preston North End, I didn't think they were great value for money in that game either. Once again though, these upcoming fixtures are going to be absolutely massive for Stoke, because there is a real opportunity in these next three games, especially against Luton, Cardiff and Sheffield Wednesday, to accumulate a decent amount of points and give yourselves that cushion between yourselves and the bottom three. But lose those three matches, or lose two of those three matches, and you'll really find yourselves dragged into it. I will quickly touch on Coventry as well. I don't think any of us think that Coventry are really in this relegation scrap, but really good result for Frank Lampard there. Obviously, would have been a bit frustrated not to have won his first game against Cardiff, but to go away to a side like Millwall, leave with a clean sheet and all 3 points, that's a really solid result where confidence will be built upon on the back of that, I'm sure. But looking at the Championship table right now, who for you are the three that go down? Obviously, we didn't get to see Oxford, Cardiff or Plymouth this weekend. They have to be taken into consideration as well. We've got some big matches coming up in midweek, which once again are really going to influence things in and around the bottom of the Championship. We'll be predicting those games tomorrow on the channel, so make sure to stay tuned for that. I welcome all your guys' thoughts on the relegation scrap in the comments down below. Apart from that though, that will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you did go in to enjoy, make sure to leave a like, and I'll see you all in the next one.